All right, welcome to my polling web app presentation of the project that I created. In this video, I'm going to walk everyone through the app I created using Django. It is a polling app, so question you can input, answers that are provided, you get to vote. Votes are tallied and then displayed. Here's the GitHub repository for it. This is the two folders, README, database, all the Django template stuff. So just short overview. You can read that if you want to. Go to this repo, and then you can read it yourself. So I used Django Admin 3.2.8, Python 3.9.7, also the widget tweaks library, super helpful for changing classes and HTML tags of things that you're going to dynamically create in Django. I did this all in VS Code as well. I relied pretty heavily on some YouTube tutorials and just Django beginner tutorials for this project. This is my first time ever doing Django, so I had to start somewhere. And some future things that I want to work on, I guess I'll just put them out there at the beginning so that you can kind of think about them as I go through. Deleting stuff, I don't have any way of doing that yet. Displaying all the available poll results on one page is something that's in progress now, but isn't complete. And then having the ability to have multiple people vote so that it doesn't just go straight to the results page after the first person votes. And also maybe some visualizations, maybe like a pie chart or something on the results page using some like Pandas or Altair. That would be pretty cool as well. So let's go to the code. Here we've got, so this is the Django template it gives you, the polling web app with the manage.py. Inside of here, you got your settings to like go through like apps that you've installed, stuff like that. URLs where you're pathing to the things that your page where your pages are, all of that. So I'll go through those in a sec, but this is the main web app. So in here, we've got some templates, HTML templates. They all kind of extend this base, so they have a style sheet, all of this kind of stuff. These were some bootstrap templates. I don't know a ton of HTML and CSS, and that wasn't really the point of this project anyway. It was to learn Django, so I use these templates instead of creating all of this myself. But you can go through, look at all those. They all just have the information for each one, but I'll go through those again in a sec. So very first thing that I learned to do in Django is to set up your views. So views are basically the thing that points HTTP request to whatever page it needs to display. So like in this case, this one's probably the simplest. This home page, it's gonna take this, which I'll talk about in a sec, but it's gonna return a render of the request that you pass in, and then the path to the HTML, and then whatever context you're going to pass into. And what this does is it tells the computer, oh, like render this HTML file, right? And that works in union with the views page. So in your URLs, then you say, oh, the path to the home is if the URL has nothing after it, then it's going to be the home page, and that's going to be found in the polls view, and the name is going to be home. So you do that for every page that you want to display. You take in a request, and then you render with the request and the path to the stuff. And then there's this context variable. Another context is really for when you want to dynamically change your pages using Django. So context is stuff that you pass in that then that HTML document can use to change it. So in this case, home, it's going to take in this polls class. So let's go look at that. So it's inside of my models. We create this class called poll, and it extends it's using the models function inside of the Django.db library. And what that does is it basically creates a database using the class initializations that you pass in. So what this will do is I have a question, option 1, 2, 3, option count 1, 2, 3. That'll create a database with those as the columns in a table. So it'll have a question, an option, and it'll auto assign full IDs for now, but we'll get into that later. And then I also wrote some functions inside of this class. So like we can return the total, which is just the count of all of those added together from the database. The percentage for each option, which is the total the count divided by the total and then multiplied by 100. And that's all used on my results page. So yeah, that's the class that I'm using inside of these views. So you create an object of the class, and then you want, for the home page at least, I want all of the objects inside of poll. So then I'm setting that equal to every object inside of poll, all of the data in the database. And then in the context, I'm just going to pass in this dictionary of stuff, which is just polls. So I pass that in, and then if we go to the home page, we can see that like the very first right here. So we're creating a for loop and saying for a poll in polls. So for each item in the polls database, what we're going to do is we're going to get the URL of vote and the poll ID. So this, and creating a class, and this is for votes and view results. So this is all just for the URLs to at the top of the page. So you can switch to the votes page, the results page. And also right here, so you've got the poll.question. So inside of this for loop, it'll take the poll.question, which was in this class. We can see it'll just return the text field that was populated, and that will then become it'll go into this strong tag, right? So you can do that once you pass in context. So that's for the home page. It'll show you all the available polls by doing that. It'll go through, look at the poll question, and then it'll have a vote and results with the poll ID as a URL that you can go to. And let me just load up the page real quick to show you how this works. So let's move this out of the way. We've got, let's run the server. We can open it up. And this is what it looks like. So let me hide this. So inside of our page, this is what the home page was doing, is it was saying available polls, and then it was going through the database and listing all of these polls.question with a vote and a view result. So these are both links too. They bring us to the vote page or the view results page respectively, right? So let's go back and look at our Python code. So for the next view, we've got create, vote, results, and all results. So these are all pretty similar. So I'm not going to go through each one of them quite as in depth as the home page. Basically what these are doing is they are taking in context from the polls, and sometimes it's everything, sometimes it's just individual things. So for this one, for instance, you don't want to vote on every single object in the vote or in the polls database, right? So it's getting it by the poll ID that you pass in. And then the whole idea of post versus get, that's a pretty lengthy conversation, but post is basically when you want to save a change securely into your database. So it's checking to see if the request is a post, and if it is, then it's gonna change all these things in the database depending on a certain option. And then it'll return, or if it doesn't, it'll return a invalid form response. And then it'll save it and then redirect you back to it'll redirect you to the results of that ID. And so you're still just passing in that same polls class into this one. This one, pretty similar too. You're getting the ID just to display the results. So you're displaying the result only for the right ID'd poll. And then this one, it's work in progress, but it shouldn't need to take in an ID because it should just display the results for every poll in a for loop. But yeah, so we can go through, look at the create. So this is where I'm using the widget tweaks library that you have to install for Django. What that does is you can use this render field call, and what you can do with that is you can then take in your form.question, but then you can also change the HTML stuff, like the attributes about it. So you can change the class and like this, like rows, for example, that I'm doing here. So usually when you just like do form.question inside of here, it would populate it with the form.question, but it would just default to, it could be random, the HTML stuff. And so I wanted it to be controlled by the form-control CSS. So you use this render field in order to make that possible. And so, yeah, again, it's just taking in the poll's context, and for each thing, it's getting the question, and then it's displaying the result or option. This is the create. So then you can fill in those fields, and then when you submit it, it submits that post request that then inside of your view is handled in this function. Same for vote. It's a very similar HTML. You have to use this CSRF token for post request so that it knows that it's coming from a legitimate HTML page. But this one does a pretty similar thing. It's gonna update option 1, or put option 1, option 2, option 3 all in here, and then they're able to vote on it, and you can submit, and it'll submit the input from the radio button that you can push. So yeah, that's basically all the HTML, the views. One other thing that I'm using is Django has some built-in stuff for forms, so you can create a form template, and this will basically just give it these fields as options, and then inside of the view, I'm using this in the create function so that every time someone wants to create something, I don't need to write out all of the form fields inside of the HTML. It'll auto-generate all of those using that class that's built using the model form Django function. So, and it'll just populate it with a question, option 1, option 2, and option 3 as the fields. So that works out really well as well. But aside from that, that's basically everything that this project does. I'll do a quick demo of it working. One last important thing to note is when you're using Django, it's important to make sure that your settings are all handled correctly. The only thing I think I really had to change in here was the installed apps. So you need to make sure that your poll app and then the widget tweaks are put in this installed apps section, or it won't know that they exist in your Django project and won't be able to reference anything that's in them. There's also some things in here. So like you can change the database that you use. I just left it at the default SQLite database. You can use a lot of different databases. You can use cloud databases with a Django thing, with a Django web app too, but I just decided for learning's sake to leave it as the SQLite database. There's also some authentication stuff in here. I didn't have any of that in my web app. I could have it have users, stuff like that. There is an admin page, and right now that's the only way you can delete stuff from the polls database is going into the admin page. But for now, I think the functionality is good enough that the app works, and I can just add these things in the future. So let me go through and show you how the app works real quick. So again, we have the home page. All of the available polls are shown. Let's go to this one. What's the best framework? Got Node.js, Django, React. Clearly it's Django. We'll submit that. And then it'll show us all of the results and even a percentage using that class or that function inside of the database class. So 62% of people that I've talked to agree that Django is the best framework. So we can go back to the home page. You can vote on any of the other ones. You can just view the results if you want. And then we can create one too. So maybe what's the best month? Let's say my birthday's in March, so definitely have to have that in there. Let's say December, pretty good holiday season. And then how about August, back to school, right? It's a good time. Let's submit that, and then see it populates it at the bottom. It's the newest one. You can vote on that as well. March, because it's my birthday. There you go. 100% of people, just me. But yeah, that's my web app. That's it in Django working. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, I'll leave my contact information on the GitHub repository. But thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you next time.